They took their 4x4 and they
Oh,
dug up the turf.
Okay, well, sorry to interrupt, but we got to start.
Yep.
So, good evening. At this time, I'd like to call our August 21 meeting to order. If you're willing and able, please stand and join in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Commissioners, in front of you, we have an agenda for tonight. Are there any additions, corrections, or changes that you see that need to be made to the agenda? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve. Minutes is drafted.
I'll move that presented.
Second. Discussion. Discussion. Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. At this time, we have an opportunity for the public to comment. If you'd like to make a comment, please come to the microphone, state your name and address. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. We'll get to you, don't worry.
I'm good.
In your packet was supplied the minutes of the July 17 meeting. Any additions or corrections to those? There is one that well, a couple, but there's one up at the top, the gobbledygook was supposed to say draft.
So in our version, it's a draft.
The one
And
came
something
by.
happens to it when it gets into her packet thing.
Any other changes or corrections? Yes, Julie.
On page 3, we're missing a G for next meeting date. The top line, second line.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. Anything else? I have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 17 meeting as changed.
Move to approve minutes as amended.
Thank you, Paul. Support. Rick supported. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, now on to our public comment. If you'd like to say something, please step to the microphone,
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
state your name and address, and please keep your comments germane to our meeting tonight. Go ahead.
Your comments to what? What's the last?
Two topics that are on our agenda. That's okay.
Well, it's a little bit more general. I mean, I think I'm preempting John Westman a little bit. Last night at the board meeting, it went long, and we was way late. We appointed committed to putting a road commission subcommittee together. I think, Tom, this is especially interested to you, because last time we talked about roads, I talked to you about it, it was probably 2019, with George Goodman, when we actually sat right back there in that corner, talking about capital improvements. The motivation is that the village passed for Webster Township roads, so we're going to impanel, hopefully next month, for consideration for the board, a road subcommittee. So I'm here to recruit. This is part of what John may talk about later, but I was asked that the board to lead up the appointment for helping configure what that looks like for the next month. And my charge is probably for the next 2 to 3 weeks is to put together a list of names of folks that are volunteering to be on the road subcommittee. Right now it's myself, David Daly, and John Shard. I'm always going to nominate George, but I'll let him nominate himself. So if you know of anybody or is interested in doing it, please let me know. And hopefully, the idea is the clock's ticking towards next March when we actually commit the funding for the next year's budget. And the idea is to make sure the road commission and the township are aligned funding-wise, both on a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year basis for making sure all the money that's been committed, is approved in the millage, is spent in conjunction with input from the township, in coordination with Washington County Road Commission. This one kind of got started in 2019-20 when I was a board member. We met with the road commission a bunch when Cheryl was still involved, but Cheryl retired, COVID happened, fast forward to now. So now's not the time to be shy. If you're interested, there's people in the room that know how to get in touch with me, so let me know. And I hope to have my charge done in the next 3 weeks. Thank you.
Quick question.
Sure.
How many people are you looking to have on this subcommittee?
My input would be, I think this is a board decision. 3 seems too many, 7 seems a lot. I would think 3, 4, 5 is probably about the right number. It's not a voting board. The idea is to assemble what the long-term plan looks like for roads in conjunction with the road commission. So 10 is way too many. So that's a board question, but my input would be 3, 4, 5. Probably some number closer to 5. Seems about right to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Peter Stevens, 7500 Trotters Lane. Just in relation to the keeping of animals ordinance that you're going to be considering this evening, it seems as though the language about keeping roosters off has come out, unless I'm mistaken. But if it has, thank you. The other comment is back to the vicious animals thing, and I would just ask why this is being kept in. To me, it seems like it's a subjective definition that someone's going to look at an animal and they're going to decide if it's vicious. I was wondering if anybody on the planning commission might be able to give me an example of what would be a vicious animal not allowed under this ordinance before you go forward in passing what is something that's awfully subjective looking. Would anybody be able to give me an example of a vicious animal?
Wolf dog hybrid.
There's a definition of the
The definition doesn't define any actual animals, it just defines something that's going to attack without being provoked. And I guess, again, as far as the subjective thing goes, I would argue that no animal is just going to attack completely unprovoked. They defend territory, they defend food, they defend young, they defend themselves. I just don't see what vicious animal, I don't see what it adds to this ordinance, and it's just something that feels subjective and could be used to potentially punish people that don't have these animals anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Daly, 7223 Mulder. Just one comment, and I missed the last meeting, the meeting before, and I know Paul had brought it up as well. This whole net versus gross acreage, you pay taxes on 3 acres. It's 3 acres. I don't know why we try and complicate it with net versus gross, and I certainly would hate to have somebody, be in violation because they did a wrong calculation, and instead of having 3.1, they had 2 point whatever. So anyway, I just like to make it simple for everyone. And you pay taxes on what you own. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a comment from the public? Seeing none, we'll go to the Planning and Zoning Administration report. Sri?
Nothing significant other than the usual stuff. I do want to, update the report with a couple of notes I made regarding amendments, something the Plan Commission may want to consider at the next meeting. We do have a list of priority amendments that were recommended by Master Plan. And then we're working on keeping of animals right now. And then we kind of need to pick back on the stormwater management and the shipping containers amendment. ZBA has asked the Planning Commission to look into the amendment to address expansion of non-conforming structures and standards of approval. And the Township Board is currently working on private road ordinance, which will also would require some amendments to the definitions and some standards so that the zoning ordinance and the private road ordinance are in alignment. Just a quick discussion to go over the list and then figure out how we want to plan the next couple months.
Thank you. Any questions of Sri at this point? Commissioners? Seeing none. Mr. Westman, board report.
Another long meeting last night. We spent a considerable amount of time discussing potential amendments to the private road ordinance. We probably got 2/3 of the way through it, but we were not able to finish, so we were not able to get to a point where we could consider or adapt the resolution regarding that. We talked about, at the request of the clerk, we talked about a guest Wi-Fi policy so that people could get Wi-Fi here in the hall. And the clerk is going to follow up on that and request IT to do it. I'm not really sure who IT is, but she's going to follow up on that anyway. We approved a special event request for the Webster Fall Festival that the Historical Society and the church, Webster Church, put on every year. It will be on Saturday, September 28th, on Historical Society grounds next door. We've been requested by Washtenaw County to provide input regarding the materials management plan. And the materials they're talking about are waste materials, and the objective is to come up with a plan that reduces the amount of stuff that goes into the landfills and increases the recyclability of the remainder. So we're not really sure what it is they want from us, so the clerk is going to get back with them and find out exactly what kind of input they're looking for. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. This is a years-long plan to get something adopted. We approved the Natural Features Committee request for $500 to produce and mail a insert regarding natural rivers brochure, and also letters to residents who live within that district and potential commercial operators who might be expected to work in that district. So we did approve that expenditure. We've talked about a standby generator for the township hall off and on for years, but it was brought up on the agenda last night, and Supervisor Kinsley is going to solicit some bids from at least three contractors, and also we need to have them take a look at what our real requirements are, because there are different levels of service that we can provide. And so that is a work in progress. Our
our election workers have requested the ability to get in touch with our security person very quickly if it is needed during an election. And so the request was to look into a panic button system that they can use. We recommended that the office manager look into this and purchase an appropriate system prior to the November election. Brent Savinger already talked about the Township Road Subcommittee, so I won't talk about that. We talked about a credit card policy for the township, but tabled it until September. And we finally had an error in numbering of resolutions, and so we corrected that error. And that's all I had for the board.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Wesson? Seeing none, we'll move to the CBRA report. Mr. Kleinschmidt.
Well, the CBA had two requests for variances on the August 7th. The first one was on Leach Lane. They wanted to expand a home, the game room and master bedroom. And the existing house, the deck and the sunroom is what makes the house non-conforming, isn't it? Their request is to expand a non-conforming structure. A building permit was granted for sunroom years ago, and it's supposed to be in compliance, but the township inspected it and approved it in error. It was a few feet out of the setback. And a new deck is 12 feet into the building setback from the water. Administrative approval can be granted up to 20 feet according to our zoning ordinance. The expansion that they're talking about building is, all of it is in is legal as far as setbacks, so it's just the idea that the existing right now is what makes it non-conforming, but the new structure is all conforming with the setbacks. So that variance was granted by the ZBA. The second one was on 8249 Scully Road, and the house is like a 1,200 square foot family home. They got 5 people, 2 of them which are with special needs. They needed to add a bedroom. The current house is 69 feet from the road center line, and it should be 93 feet. But the proposed addition is in compliance with the setbacks. The house was built in the 50s, which was, at the time, was legal. So it's a legal non-conforming structure. So, and the addition is all on the opposite side of the house and the road. So, for various reasons, I went through the approval procedure, and finally it was approved by the CBA zoning board.
Thank you. Anything for Commissioner Schmidt?
I just wanted to add one comment. If you recall, the Planning Commission has amended Article 16, the surface water setback, and allowed an option for administrative waiver to reduce the setback for Base Lake District. One of the applications the ZBA reviewed includes expansion of the deck that would require a reduction of the waterfront setback. So just wanted to know that I will be applying that for the first time since its adoption.
Thank you. Anything else, or Sri, on that topic? Seeing none. PDR report.
I think everybody knows that the PDR newly did pass in the last election by a margin of close to 2-1. So that program will stay in existence for another 10 years. We did close on a project on the 22nd of July. It was 29 acres of field in Latour Woods. It's where Joy Road and where James Road, that's just on the south side of Joy Road, just west of where James Road terminates. It's next to Legacy Woodland Preserve, and that's one of the reasons we chose the property, because there is preserved property next to it, and this parcel does have 2 streams on it, so it's a pretty desirable parcel. We've got 2 more that will probably close by the end of the year. One is 71 acres, the other is 38 acres, so for the year we'll have about 140 acres projected. Behind that, we do have some other projects that we're working on, but we don't have any kind of projected closing times as yet on those. I would add that we have gotten some pretty good applications in the last couple of months. For a while, we had a dearth of applications. They were just all really small, isolated parcels, but now we've got some bigger pieces, so we will have something to work on. That's all I have for PDR.
Thank you. Any questions on PDR? Seeing none, Kay, would you like to update us on the Natural Features Committee?
So with the approval from the board, we'll be working on implementing that mailing to residents in the Natural Reserves District and businesses. And we're also organizing to participate in the Webster Fall Festival, to have some activities for kids and also some brochures and information for adults. We have a couple different ideas, but fun stuff relating to natural features, of course. Maybe frogs, maybe birds. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Natural features for Kay? Seeing none, we do not have a public hearing tonight, so we'll move to old business, which is the keeping of animals. As you know, we have been working on this for quite some time. We've also sought input from our local residents, and we've also had expert input from Ryan up at Michigan on our drafts, who has given us pretty good response and good information with which to create that draft. So, Sri has provided a draft for us tonight. Would you like to review the cover memo, just to bring it up to speed since the last meeting?
We can probably get into detail as we go into the actual language discussion, but the revised draft that's in front of you addresses the comments that were discussed at the last meeting primarily. There were a couple of new provisions were added to address the intent of the discussion as well. For example, the young animal discussion, there was a comment made regarding how are the young animals regulated? Are they counted towards the density or not? So there was a definition added, and then there was sorry, there was a standard added and then clarification provided with regards to that. And then there's a discussion of a question I put forward in my memo with regards to the wetland, excluding wetlands from density calculations. I understand that was not one of the items discussed at the last meeting. It was discussed in previous meetings. I just wanted to provide one more opportunity just to make sure that the implications of including wetlands in density calculations is considered before taking it to the next step. If after discussion, if the planning commission decides to not to exclude wetlands from the area that's used for density calculations, then all that needs to be done is removing one standard in section F. I can focus on it when I come to it. Other than that, we can do our usual thing, go section by section, and if there are any questions or clarifications needed, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you for bringing us up to speed on that. Thank you. Commissioners, as you said, I will say this up front, we have been looking at this for quite some time. We agreed on a draft on our last meeting. Based on what we agreed on, it's my sincere hope that we can move this forward tonight. So, nothing has changed on intent since the last meeting. Nothing has changed on education and training. Nothing has changed on applicability. Does anybody have anything that needs to be updated or revised in those areas? Seeing none. Other uses, number 2, under applicability. I found one small typo. On number 4, under petting farms, it needs a space between section period and 2.10. The last meeting under right to farm protection, we had changed it to conform to the Michigan Department of Agriculture, MDARD. That was carried over and is correct. Any other things in that section to review or change? To section D, general prohibitions and allowances. We had changed, revised that to add some verbiage on roosters. Anything else in there that needs to be revised or commented on?
Just the sentence under vicious animals, there's a double in, but also under no circumstances should it say can a vicious animal, or just leave this a shall.
Move shall to the front of the name.
Yeah.
Martha, you got it? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, George. Anything else in that section? Moving on to E, general conformance. All of our revisions from the minutes were carried over. Any comments or changes there? Seeing none from the commissioners, to section F, standards for animal density calculation.
I do. Under F2, where it says to determine the number of animals permitted on a property, the area shall exclude the area of the property that contains wetlands. I believe it should say that contains state-regulated wetlands for surface water. We're not in the business of regulating wetlands. And then under young animals born to a permitted animal may be kept on site constituting additional animal density. I don't think we refer to animal units anywhere else.
You agree to, that's right, thank you.
And then the end of it, it just should say animals are weaned or reach a significant portion of their full size or strength, whichever is applicable.
Commissioners, do you agree with John's comments?
Should you change reaches to reach, is that what you said?
Or, yes,
Yes, okay.
yeah, we're dropping the S off of reaches. Okay, you also have some comments.
I would like to discuss two further.
Okay.
So we actually discussed this previously. So it was part of the net area. We were talking about whether we should include wetlands and other things before calculating the area, usable area. And at the time, we said no. So as you know, I'm a big supporter of natural features, etc. But so for the densities of the animals for lots of 5 acres and less, they're already very low. And the reason is to balance the rights of landowners in these small lots that are primarily residential, balance the noise and smell for their neighbors. So I think that's enough. I think just using net area is enough. I think trying to then add this makes it exceptionally more complicated, and it only applies to 5 acres and less. And so my other point is we have Article 16, and the purpose of Article 16 is to protect those wetlands, surface water, groundwater, and natural rivers district. And we define a vegetative strip, we define development setbacks. The vegetative strip, the way it's described, it's pretty clear you should not be having animals in there. But in the natural rivers district, it actually says you should not have any farming activities riverside in the vegetative strip. And it also has setbacks for any intensive livestock operations. So I would like to see that Article 16, which covers the whole township, remains our primary protections for all those things. And I think adding this here makes it so much more complicated that an individual homeowner, we say we don't want to have permits here, but an individual homeowner is not going to be able to figure this out on their own. And so I would like to keep it simple, and because our densities are already low, I think we should take out this, we should not have any calculations about wetlands or surface water in here. That's my thought.
So your recommendation is to remove number 2.
Yes, that the area density calculation should not include those two things.
So you want to eliminate number 2?
I guess I want to eliminate the whole thing, yes, just have 1 and 3.
Well, 2.
Yeah, 1
1
and
and
2.
2.
3 becomes 2.
So I think we protect those things in Article 16.
Commissioners, thoughts?
I'm fine with that.
George?
I concur.
I agree, absolutely. I have a different reason for dropping it, but I'll go through.
Okay.
My concern was just getting into the business of quarter acre wetlands, which we're not equipped to do.
Okay. We are dropping number 2 and renumbering number 3 to become number 2.
And then I had a question about 3. So this means that for a short period of time, you could have more than the number of animals if some of them are young.
We discussed this in the last meeting.
I just want to clarify, that's
Correct.
true, right?
Came up with regard to rabbits in particular.
Rabbits and poultry.
Correct.
So, good question for you. So if I've got 5 chickens, and I go buy 10 chicks, I buy them, now I've got too many. Does this allow me to go buy chicks and have non-mature animals? Or does it not allow me to do that? Just a question for the commissioner.
As I read it, it's allowed, but
No, it's it says born to a permitted animal on site. So it says you have to hatch your own chicks. But can you go buy replacement chicks and meet our ordinance here?
Commissioners, thoughts?
Well, I think that was one of the points made by a resident, that
It was.
when you buy the chicks, maybe one of them is not a female.
No, I think
That was
that comment was made with regards to regulating roosters versus chickens. That when you buy chicks, you wouldn't know whether it's gonna be a male rooster or a chicken. In this case, it may feel a non-issue for chicks with regards to density or animal keeping, but what I think the question that should be considered is what happens with regards to getting young animals which are not born to the animals when it comes to pigs or cows or larger animals.
You're right. If I go and buy a lamb, I see the number, I'm violating this also, but now I'm buying a bigger animal.
Right.
So you stick to this for all animals, has to be born on site.
Then is the solution just to remove the language that says born to? And revise it to say young animals are permitted or may be kept on site until such animals are weaned and reach significant portion. Just drop the born to portion.
So they can bring a lamb,
Right.
then
So here's my recommended language. Young animals may be kept on site without constituting additional animal density until such animals are weaned or reach a significant portion of their full size and strength, whichever is applicable.
I do wanted to point out, there's no density regulating how many young animals can be kept on site. Wanted to make sure you're not, you're aware of that when you make the change.
So what are you recommending?
Your change is good.
Martha, did you get that? Okay, thank you. We agreed to change it to that? Seeing no additional comments, I'm moving on. To G, type of animals permitted. All the changes from our minutes I saw were incorporated.
There was an issue with the reference to 13.25K, which has to do with the sale of animals, it has nothing to do with animal density.
Yeah, it's H.
We talked about it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're on number one. Have we moved on from number one? Did I miss something? I was only talking about number one.
We didn't say one, so, okay, we're on one. Good.
Nothing on number one?
No.
G1? G2? Nothing on G2?
No,
Well,
John's having.
what John said.
Okay, your comment is on G2.
Yeah.
And then in the header, I was making a reference to F2, which we removed, so I'll have to read that as well.
So it should be H, right?
13.25H.
9.25H.
No, everywhere.
Yes,
Mhm.
and in number 3 also.
H.
I have a comment with regard to our young animal discussion earlier. Should we add the word mature after type of animal? In the headers, type of mature animal. Because of potential confusion with what we defined earlier as young animals. And if somebody is trying to do this calculation, I can see them being confused between what they think is a mature animal versus the young animals that were referenced earlier.
But there's a reference to F3 under the header.
Right, I understand it. I'm just trying to provide clarity without having to have somebody go somewhere else.
I would recommend
That's
adding
three.
adult animal.
Adults, yeah. Adults.
Adult animal, mature animal, adult, is that the word we want? Because we use mature when we're talking about young animals,
Did we?
No.
No, that word's not in there,
in our discussion.
but it's not in
Right, I
the
understand.
definition.
Pick a word,
Adult.
adult, type of adult animal. Thank you. Anybody else have any different word that they prefer? So that change will take place in both number 2's header and in number 3's header. Correct?
And G,
Where in G?
type and number of adult animals permitted.
Do we want to include that in the header?
Sure.
Thank you. G4, or is there anything else on those 2 or 3 in the charts?
As long as we cleaned up, I wasn't sure. So you
Yeah.
F3 under type of animal adult, you don't have F3 anymore, it's F2 now, right?
Yeah, we did that earlier.
I'm just trying to make sure I didn't miss something, okay?
No.
So under G, the header, does just saying adult in the header, per Julie's comment, cover the whole thing?
George, if we've already got it down there, it's fine, George, just, we'll put adult. I mean, now we're getting into the little nitty-gritty things. We can move on. G4, anything on lots of net area less than 1 acre?
The F3 correction there too.
Yes, I thought we talked about that, but I could be wrong.
Actually, wouldn't it, how come it only talks about, I'm wondering why it doesn't reference F1 and F2 there for 4. But I guess it's everything under 1, so everybody's eligible. Is that the deal?
It does say net area, and then
Yeah.
I was changing the terms from net area to determination of eligibility under F1 because of the wetlands thing. Now that that's gone, I can change it back to net area. Under F1, the title.
No, I'm looking at,
No, she's.
so I was at 4, and I was
G4.
looking at the reference back to F. And for the other 2, we referenced both F1 and F2, but here we only referenced F2. So I just didn't know why we didn't reference both of them for this section.
That's what I was saying. Because it has net area already, I didn't do F1, but then I just realized I changed the title over there, so we can just say F1 and F2.
Where are you saying that, Sri, for the minutes?
Under G4, at the end where it says C 13.25 F2,
It says
3, but we decided to change universally to 2. So that should just say 13.25 F1 and 2. Mm-hmm.
but up here, we do which one because we made it
No,
H.
that's fine.
It's
It was the
okay
K.
here?
It was the K. This is what changes to H.
So not, those are.
No. Are we good on F4 or G4? Sorry. Section H, animal for educational purposes. Any comments, changes? allowance, special allowances. You'll notice there was some language was changed there a little bit. So some of that was a combination of Sri and Ryan working back and forth on clarification.
A little bit, and then I wanted to simplify that and use terms which are defined in the ordinance so that there's some kind of connectivity. So everything in green, they are defined in section 2.10.
Any comments on section I, 1, 2, 3, and 4? Yes.
I had a question about this whole special allowance. There's a bunch of things listed here. And is the assumption that if you're near any of these things, that would allow you to have more density than your net area? Or is the assumption sometimes that if you're surrounded by wetlands, for example, you might not be allowed to have more than your allotted? I'm not sure exactly how this would work, how these things be evaluated.
I think it's kind of a little bit of both. We're saying, like, hypothetically, for example, the lots with net G3 wants to have large livestock, then it's not permitted, but because of special allowance, we can allow large livestock, but not more than 2, which is allowed for the preceding category. Same case with plots with net area less than 1 acre. Right now, they're only allowed to have chickens, but if they're surrounded by area, then they may be allowed to have poultry, rabbits, or small livestock, immediately preceding category.
So you're giving examples where it gets increased to the preceding area. Could there be times when the answer is no, I'm sorry, you have these things, you've got to stay in your category?
Kay, if you'll recall the discussion on why we put this in here, is we didn't want people coming back and forth for every single change or whatever they wanted. It's something minor. So it provided her with the administrative allowance to look at this without bringing it back to the ZBA or to us.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand how it works because this language was not in there before. So it could be that sometimes your answer to their application is, no, I'm sorry, you have to stick with whatever category you're in. True?
That was the answer based on the previous draft. But then one of the planning commission member raised a point that, for example, if my lot is abutting the Huron River Metro Park or a PDR land where I would have additional space, can I be allowed to have a different animal?
So I think I'm not making myself clear. I agree with this section. I think there should be an opportunity for someone to say, oh, I have a special circumstance and get that evaluated. My question is really that sometimes the answers, even if they apply and you evaluate it, it could still be, I'm sorry, you have to stick with your category. True? It's not always going to be a bump up to the next category with these things in there. You have to evaluate the whole picture.
Yes, but you are raising a good point over there because the special allowance tells us when one may be permitted, but it doesn't give any standards to say when we can say no.
That's my point.
I see your point now. Thank you. Okay, then let's talk about that. So what we're saying is if you have primary conservation areas, public use areas, and wildlife habitats and floodplains, that would limit any future development. You will be able to, what factors would make that special allowance not ineligible or inapplicable?
I have a suggestion. Would just changing the word would to may solve this problem? On the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line, it starts with would apply, would limit any future development. It doesn't necessarily, it may, but it necessarily wouldn't. So how about we just change that to may, and that will solve the issue.
It still doesn't.
But that allows you the latitude to go up or down.
second line where it says the zoning administrator may permit allows to say yes or no. The would limit any future development is just saying that all these areas cannot be divided further.
So I have an example. So you're in the floodplain. Your property is next to the floodplain. If the floodplain is not on your property, but just next to you, okay, maybe you say yes. But if the floodplain extends into your property and takes up a lot of space, too, then maybe you'd have to say, no, your category is your category. So how do you decide that?
Oh, no, this is when the floodplain, talking about the areas when your property abuts. If it's on your property, then it doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't apply.
It says are surrounded by the following or similar areas.
But yes, so I think that's where, I see that that's where the confusion is, we could say which abut,
Abuts, following or similar areas.
or which are edge, yeah.
Okay, can you please repeat
Or,
exactly what you want?
Can I have just a second trying to make sure I'm giving you the right advice? Okay, I think we keep the first sentence as is for lots with net area of 1 to 4.99 acres, which are surrounded by the following or similar areas located on adjacent properties.
Located on.
Adjacent properties. And the denial could be the zoning administrator may permit. So the denial standard could be if there's a finding or potential for overcrowding or, you know, any violation, potential violations with nuisance ordinance, the zoning ordinance or administrator may deny the request. It is subjective, but some catch-all in there, so that if there's always a option to go to ZBA to appeal the zoning administrator's interpretation or denial or finding.
So you want that sentence before the applicant shall provide the following information?
I wanted to see if that's acceptable, then I can come up, indicate where and what.
Okay, does that get to the gist of what you're thinking?
Or in the other terms, it says that would limit any future development. I could deny the request if I feel like there is potential for future development.
Well, but by using the word may in the second sentence, do we need to add another sentence? By implication, you may or may not. Or do we just add it there? May or may not permit a different type of animal,
No, I'm not talking
without adding another sentence.
I'm not talking about the implication may or may not. I'm just talking about would you want to add anything in addition to limiting any future development? Is that one enough to determine may or may not, or do you want to add an additional nuisance? Or I'm asking if that's enough, then it can stay as is.
I would think that's enough, because it said would limit any future development.
Right.
If that doesn't exist and you say there is a potential for future development, then you can reject it, or say you stay in your category.
So leave the word would as it is, not may.
That would, so the would there is the reason for,
Oh, I get it.
yeah, would, that would limit, yeah. I'm debating. You can't be guaranteed. So,
That's why I would change that one to may also.
The only reason I was recommending to consider nuisance is that if you have regulated, if you're surrounded by regulated wetlands, that only indicates that you're not going to be a nuisance to your neighbor. But that doesn't give your animals to have additional pasture area or area to move around, so you may be overcrowding on the
Actually,
smaller properties.
all these things are pretty strict, right? A conservation area, a conservation easement, these are regulated things, so
They are.
maybe wood is okay.
Are we good with wood? Well, go ahead.
I just have a fundamental question, I want to step back. So commissioners, on lots of 2 to 5 acres, 2 to 4.99 acres, why aren't large animals allowed? Is it because neighbor nuisance, or is it because the animals are just too big for those small lots? Now, if it's the second, then why are we even discussing this? If it's the first, okay, let's have the discussion. But I believe the animals are too large for those lots. Why does it matter if I'm surrounded by nobody? If I want a small property, why am I allowed to have large animals that are too big for the property? I thought when I read this, I thought, is this only applying to somebody who wants to have chickens that make a lot of noise, or roosters, saying, if I'm on 2 acres and I'm surrounded by nobody and I won't ever be surrounded by anybody, I can have roosters. That's what I thought it applied to, not putting big animals in small properties.
Sounds like a good point.
The term then the PC should be focusing on is where it says may permit a different animal type. We could look may permit additional poultry.
Well, then you'd make the decision. If they want to have roosters and they're surrounded by property that's preserved and there won't ever be a neighbor, then it can pretend it's a 5-acre lot and they can have roosters. But back to my fundamental question, why in G2 don't we allow large animals full-time? We allow them for 4-H, it's a temporary thing. If the reason is the animals are too large for those properties, then why are we even discussing it in this section?
Well, I think everybody needs to remember that the reason this is even being discussed is that there's, or at least one and probably other parcels that are pretty much surrounded by preserved land, but they're less than 5 acres. And the argument was, why can't we have some animals on this 4.5 acre lot if we're completely surrounded by preserved land? And under the revised or amended ordinance, they wouldn't be able to do that. So that wasn't the initial argument. The initial, this is arguing that there's something special about being surrounded by these types of lands that would allow you to deviate from the other standards earlier in the ordinance. And I don't think this whole thing was precipitated again by the fact that if you had parcels smaller than 5 acres, you couldn't do anything. And that was what the people were upset about, because, and rightly so, they're basically in the middle of 1,000 acres of farmland, protected farmland. Why can't they have a few animals on the property? And this doesn't address that at all, because it's already addressed if we amend the ordinance to include all of these earlier provisions. So I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish here. I think that's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
If I may, through the chair.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, Kate did have a comment. She wanted-
I'm a little confused because let's say I have a lot with 1 to 1.99 acres and I want to be bumped up to the larger numbers of animals for 2 to 4.99. There, large livestock is only allowed temporarily, not permanently. So I should not be allowed to have that permanently, ever. Okay, those are only temporary, so the categories that apply are only poultry and small livestock. So is your question whether the small livestock are even too big for the smaller lots, or just the big ones?
No. I believe I heard 15 minutes ago or so, where large animals are gonna be allowed. If they came forward with a special allowance, they could get a large animal. There was no 4-H or FFA mentioned. I thought I heard that, so I thought, well, this makes no sense to me. But once again, I'll go back to your point. So if I've got a 1.5 acre lot, and the reason we made the density of animals as such as maximum of 2 per acre, now you're gonna increase the density more. Let's say well, what are you gonna do there? You're gonna allow 2, okay, you're gonna allow 2 per acre instead of maximum of 2. If I've got 1.5 acres, or if I got 1 acre, I can have 2. I go to the other chart, oh, I can have 2 per acre. I got 1 acre, I can have 2.
Actually, in the lower chart, you can't have any.
The small livestock,
Yeah.
I can have max of 2. Oh, it's 4H.
Only if it's 4H.
Yeah. You're right. But if you want to do that, okay, that still holds it to 2.
Too small livestock.
So are you suggesting, Paul, we eliminate I completely?
I was trying to understand why it was there. And I remember a discussion a couple meetings ago, or the last meeting, somebody brought up, yeah, I'm surrounded by no people, will never be surrounded by neighbors, why can't I have roosters? I'm at less than 5 acres. Good point. You should be able to have them, because you're disturbing nobody. That's what I thought this was for.
That's what
I didn't think it was gonna change categories and add density to lots that we already established a density for.
So Sri has a comment.
My reflection, how we ended up with I, was there were 2 comments made, one by a resident indicating that these are the allowable densities. What if I want to have 1 additional chicken or 1 this because I'm surrounded by PDR, then I would have to go to ZBA for that 1 additional chicken. So can there not be a quicker planning commission waiver or something quicker that is cost efficient and addresses time sensitivity with this amendment? And the second item we were trying to address is, well, one of the discussion at the planning commission meeting is that not just very specific to roosters, but the question raised was for smaller acres, like G4, I can only have a maximum of 5 chickens. But if I'm surrounded by a park or some other place where there's more space for my chickens to run, why can't I be allowed to have more chickens? My original recommendation was that if the planning commission does want to consider to allow some flexibility or a waiver, like you guys do for landscape standards, that in those situations, they would come to you and you would provide a waiver to consider that. But then as part of the discussion, the planning commission then said, we want to just keep it administrative. I reluctantly agreed. Because the reason being is that this is above and beyond what the current ordinance allows. And there might be just a few exceptional cases. We could track to see how many people are seeking those exceptions in that condition. And then if we feel like there are too many coming to planning commission, then we can revise it to keep it administrative. Just like how the ZBA.
Could we just take it out and just say, we'll start with this and not have this in there and keep it simple?
This could be a text amendment later for her comment that if we're tracking enough of them, we can make a text amendment.
If anybody wants anything different, they would just go to ZBA. But the question that was raised in one of the initial discussions is that What's my hardship? I don't have a hardship, I have a special circumstance. So, waivers based on special circumstances can only be provided, the planning commission can provide such waivers at their discretion based on special circumstance, not a hardship. So that's how we landed here. So the question, let me rephrase, the question is, if somebody wants another animal or an extra animal or a different type of animals that deviates from the section G, if we remove I, they would have to go to ZBA. If we think that's okay, let's see how many goes to ZBA, which they'll most likely be denied because there's no hardship. Then we're just saying this is it. There's no way around, there's no flexibility with this. Or you could just say the planning commission may permit a slight deviation from the above standards based on standards of review that are, for a special land use permit, but not as a special use permit. You just look at those standards of approval and allow some deviations from these standards. Then it's not hardship based. They don't have to pay $815 to have one extra chicken. They can come to you.
Go ahead, Jay.
This ordinance provides so many more opportunities for people to have animals than what we have now.
Yes.
Do we really need to make it this complicated? So at first I really like this section, but should we just keep it simple? I don't recall in other ordinances having this kind of section in there.
Yes.
So do we just leave that out, go with this, and see how it works, and then address it? I mean, it just sounds like it's getting really complicated.
But don't we need at least one sentence in there that says special allowances can be made before the planning commission based on
The standards of review
The
for a
standard-
special use permit.
the standards of review for special use permits. That would solve it, and if we're willing to track it and have them come to us, that's fine. If we agree. Well, I apologize for raising.
But I'm just thinking about what you're saying, but I went back to these charts. So regarding poultry, if somebody came to you and said, I don't have anybody around me, I want to have more, we've already discussed no roosters, hens don't make any noise. So why is somebody who has no property around them getting more of a benefit than someone that does have neighbors around them? If you follow this, it said it's 5 per acre in both categories. So they're not gaining anything by moving to another category. It's 5 per acre, period. Now, I can see those small livestock, you now have one smaller lot.
I'm confused. Aren't we talking about I, not the charts?
I am on I, but I'm discussing, well, I talks about getting more density, and it's 5 per acre for poultry and rabbits. Why does a citizen get more benefit because they have no neighbors versus a citizen who has neighbors on poultry? Because they're not going to make noise. And properly housed, they're not going to go onto the neighbor's property. So why are we discussing that one? Now, small livestock, I can see that if someone's on a 1.5 acre lot and they've got nobody around them, they could come to you, Shree, and say, hey, can I get put in category 2 to 4.99 acres where it says I can have 2 per acre because I've got no neighbors. Now there's a benefit for them. They can now have 2 goats. And we've talked about large livestock, they can't have any unless they're in 4-H. But
I thought we had an agreement, and all of a sudden we don't.
I think just to address your question, if I may, through Chair, all good points. There are definitely a lot of hypothetical situation. Coming up with something, I mean, this is definitely not anywhere close to one shoes fits all situation, which is why my original recommendation, which I would like to revisit, is proceed with caution. Allow the flexibility subject to your approval at your discretion, subject to standards of review, and track the changes, because it's really hard. We don't want to, in an attempt not to provide special allowance, we don't want to end up increasing the densities, because the intent is not to create nuisance to the subject property or neighboring properties. Because the densities have been discussed and agreed upon, if you don't want to go back and open that discussion again, the ideal way to address it would be remove I and have an allowance that they could come to planning commission if they want any deviation from G, the animal densities in item G.
Right, so, but I needs to stay, and it'll say special allowance.
Right.
It'll have that sentence.
Yes.
Commissioners,
That way it takes the burden away from the zoning administrator to be consistent.
commissioners, thoughts on that change? Does that accomplish what we're trying to get to?
What is your sentence?
She had it.
It does for me.
Thank you. Sheree, would you please read that again for,
What is the one sentence he wants to add in I? Okay.
everything gets removed in I.
Right.
This replaces it.
The planning commission may permit deviations from the animal density requirements in subsection 13.25G, provided the request meets the standards of review that are applied for special use permit approval. I will refine it a little bit, but that's the gist of it.
So it's a special land use.
It's not. You're just referring to the standards of review
The standards of review
that regulate a special use permit approval. Or you can just refer to that section. All I want to do is to provide you
Refer to
with
the
some.
section, please. I mean, you don't need to do it now, but we'll add it because unless you can put your finger on it in 13 and a half seconds.
It's 10.05 that regulates the special use procedures and standards. I'm just saying that just so you have some framework to review these applications and referring you to those, then restarting or
Commissioners, are we agreed? Is that right? Kay, you're okay? George? John, I know
Yes.
is. Paul, you okay with those changes?
No.
No.
I'd rather have I. So you
No,
got.
we do have I.
No, I'd rather have it the way it was written. Think about what you just said. Any citizen, regardless of where they live, can come in and say, I want, if they're allowed two goats, I want 6 goats. Any citizen can do that. You just took out all this about what you're surrounded by.
Right.
You just wiped it out. So the planning commission, do you want that? Do you want everybody who wants more animals that are listed here to come to us to make a decision if they're allowed to have more animals?
Great point.
That's what we talked about before, Paul.
No,
That's
we
why this is
didn't.
here.
No, I think he's right. He wants to keep that anybody can come. It's not anybody can come to PC. Anybody who are surrounded by those places can come to PC.
That's right.
I get it. So I think how we would revise it is, we'll keep the paragraph. I think, okay, we'll keep I, but we would change the zoning administrator to planning commission. And we would say, may permit a different animal type, subject to, Okay. The planning commission may permit deviations from animal density standards listed in 13.25G for lots with net area of 1 to 4.99 acres, which are surrounded by the following or similar areas located on adjacent properties, and we'll keep all that. Such approval shall be subject to the standards of review that regulate special use permit approval.
How does it get to you, just to what you're thinking?
So we're saying you're eligible to ask for a waiver if you're surrounded by these areas. And the planning commission may consider your request and approve it if you meet the standards of review for the special use permit.
Okay, I know what you're saying, that does go back to the standard review, see what they say.
Okay. Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, you want to keep the standards of review to state limit?
No, what you said is fine, I'll bring it up in the public hearing if I have an issue.
Okay.
I'll refine the language in the draft.
Okay.
Martha, is this something I can email it to you? Or just for that one, write note Shree's gonna send me?
Yeah, what you just said.
Yes. Yeah, I think you can just say what Shree said, but I'll send you the email. It will be in the draft for the public hearing.
Is everybody pretty much okay with where we landed on this?
I'm
I,
happy.
yeah, I am. I just had a terminology question. Let's get the first part of it done first. And then. Okay. It says public use areas. I'm not sure what a public use area is. I know what public lands are.
Because it's in green, it's defined. I'm gonna get to that in just a bit and tell you what that is.
Public parks, playgrounds, or other recreational areas, scenic or historic sites, public school sites or sites.
Julie, you gotta speak up. Microphone, please. Thank you.
Public parks, playgrounds, or other recreational areas, scenic or historic sites, public school sites or sites for other public buildings, and other areas dedicated to public use or enjoyment.
Essentially public parks, metro parks, public parks.
Playgrounds.
Okay, so what about university property?
So sites for other public buildings, university properties, quasi-public.
I'm okay with this.
Okay.
Everybody else is.
Is everybody else okay with that? We have a definition for it, John, in our ordinance, so we're good. Okay. We're done with I.
I found the answer. If it's a university property, it may not limit future development if it's sold off. So that's a discretion you'll have.
What about the township property?
Cross that bridge when we come to it. Are we okay with I? Is there anything we need to change at this point?
What Shree said.
Okay, Shree's gonna send the revised language for Martha to put in the minutes.
For I.
For I. Site standards, J. Anything there?
I have a question.
I do too. Go ahead.
For one, does this say if I want my chickens to go outside that I have to have a fence? One, animal shelter. It says a fence, cage, coop, barn pen, or similar shelter that permits free movement and does not result in a public nuisance. Can I let my chickens run free according to this?
We had that discussion, as I recall, the answer is no.
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 They must be contained so they don't infringe on other people's properties or out of your area.
So a public nuisance.
Correct.
Correct. It says fence, cage, coop, so if you have a coop, then you meant.
She was worried about fence.
Or something, something to contain them if they're outside. Okay,
Right.
so yes, they have to be contained.
Correct.
Thank you.
Let me ask the question on that. All right, but let me be specific here. So is that statement specific to 1 to 4.99 acres? Where in here does it say that? If I got more than 5 acres, and I got 100 acres, why can my chickens run free? Is it,
This one, it was, we did go back and forth with regards to the size. I think in this case, this says, provided with a fence, cage, coop, barn, or some similar shelter to permit free movement of the animals. I think to address the discussion, it might be a similar shelter that is sufficient to contain animals on the property.
No,
my question was is this applying only to
lot sizes.
lot sizes of 1 to 4.99 acres?
It started off with that, but I remember at the last meeting or the one before, this kind of became general standards.
That's not good.
No.
Okay.
Is there a lot size that you're proposing?
Yeah.
And what size is that lot?
You know, you certainly can't apply it to people with 5 acres or more. So, keep it to the animals that we've been talking about, 1 to 4 or 5 acres. I'm not so sure about why chickens can't run free. If you let chickens out and they don't go on your neighbor's property, they're fine. You take the risk. You let them out, they go over there, get a complaint, okay, you're in violation. But if they're running around, the neighbor sees them out, but they're on the owner's property or staying there, that's fine. The owner takes the risk. As soon as they cross and go into someone's flower bed, then a violation gets turned in, and they're not in compliance for a nuisance.
So I agree that this should apply only to the less than 5 acres.
Less than 5?
Yeah.
How about if we say all animals shall be provided with a fence, cage, coop, or similar shelter that is of sufficient size when required to prevent, not to result in a public nuisance. That way, oh, no, sorry, yes, okay, I see what you're saying. Then we'll just start with, for animals kept on crop lots less than 5 acres. So we would, all animals kept on lots less than 5 acres shall be provided with a fence, and then the rest of the sentence.
Does that meet your concern, Paul?
I'm fine. I seem to be the only one concerned, so.
Okay, George?
So I can chime in on this. I agree right here that we don't want this to become a hindrance. But I think this, as written, it's perfectly fine because fence, cage, coop, barn, pen, similar shelter to permit free movement of the animals, basically period, and not to result in a public nuisance. You go on your neighbor's property, it becomes a public nuisance. It says it right there. This does not say that you have to stay. You're providing food, water, shelter, right? You're providing the fence, coop, fence, cage, coop, barn, pen, you're providing that. Okay, but the end of this whole sentence where it says not to result in a public nuisance is that covers that they can't go on the neighbor's property and drop their business on the neighbor's porch.
Well, as I read this, it doesn't say you have to have a fence. That means you can have a coop, they can run around.
But a coop is a containment, right?
Well, but you walk down the little thing, you're out of the coop and you walk
Around a
around.
coop and you walk around.
It says or, not and.
Yeah, that's my concern is, I don't think this says that when they go outside, they have to be contained. I don't think it says that, but it does say not to result in a public nuisance.
Not to result in a public nuisance. So if they go on your neighbor's property and they don't like it, that's the problem.
Right, Ryan Coffey recommended to address animal constraint in the public nuisance ordinance. That's why we revised it to refer to the public nuisance as noted in the township's, we said that in the beginning of it, as do not result in public nuisance, and then we would address containment in the nuisance ordinance.
Yeah, just leave it with a period at the end of that.
Yeah, we'll leave it at the period at the end of that, but it's definitely up to your discretion whether you want to put the less than 5 acre or leave it as is.
No, it doesn't say you have
Doesn't
to have a
say.
fence at all.
Right. It's an or, so it's one of those things.
Okay, well, but you can go to court.
Well, or the
Someone's
public,
arguing it.
but or the public nuisance.
Especially a street, ask the attorney what he interprets that to say. If you got a case where you had to go to court, does this say what the commissioners are thinking it says?
I could, but I guess let's take a step back and look at what was the goal or the intent for the standard. I think the intent is, one, we don't want the animals to go on neighbor's property or public roadways. Two, we want to make sure that they are maintained in a proper shelter. We will be addressing animal cruelty or animal care and animal constraint in the public nuisance ordinance, but we wanted to just provide some kind of placeholder in here saying, hey, if you have a cow, make sure there's some place for it to, rest. Or if you have a couple of chickens, make sure they have a coop they can go at the end of the day. I've heard people kept pigs in the houses. That's a new thing I've learned. But, the bottom line is we just want to make sure that there is some kind of shelter provided not to create public nuisance, and then animals are kept safe and healthy.
Will this go to the lawyer before we have the public hearing?
I wasn't planning on because I could check with our supervisor and see if, would you recommend that we send the whole thing to the attorney before we send it to the board, or that one?
I thought we always had an attorney review it at some point when we got close to finishing. So I'm surprised that that's not going to happen.
You have your supervisor sitting in here tonight.
Well, I would recommend legal review after a public hearing.
Okay.
It wouldn't make any sense to do it before a public hearing.
Right.
That's totally
Okay,
fine.
so where do we stand on J, number 1, animal shelter? Leave it alone, we'll go to the public hearing, then our lawyer can take a look at it.
I say leave it alone, because I think the intent of it, it covers the intent.
Commissioners, are we okay leaving it alone for the time being?
Yes, it's got a period at the end of the
That
sentence.
needs a period of 10 seconds.
I think that's a good decision, because even if it's more than 5 acres, doesn't mean the cow cannot have a barn.
Okay, number 2, setbacks.
2 and 3 are just making sure they don't forget.
I have a question just on clarification because I was confused on how the sentence read. Listed in Article 16, period, environmental regulations. Where is the end of the sentence, if there is one.
You can just take out the period after 16.
Yes, yes, that can be a
Okay.
dash. I
So after 16, the period goes away and the hyphen replaces it, correct?
No, it's fine, no hyphen, I don't think we've used hyphen elsewhere, so
No,
the
no way.
period goes away.
No, that's the
Number
title.
16,
Article
environmental
16.
regulations, okay, thank you. Number 3, fences. Good there, we've been over this before. Sale of animal products. Any change or additions there? Seeing none, we'll go to L, zoning and compliance permit. Commissioners, anything there?
We're on K.
We passed K.
L.
We're on L. You want K? John, do you have a comment on K?
Only if it is in conflict with state regulations on meat inspection and that kind of thing. I don't know whether that's an issue or not.
Well, one of the things we talked about at the last meeting, and I know you weren't here, is that we are not regulating state or federal standards when it
Right,
comes to.
that's,
Yeah, so, right, so it wouldn't apply there. So we're still on L. Any comments on L?
Just a revision, because we changed I. In the L, the first sentence states, a permit is not required for keeping of animals as an accessory use unless otherwise noted in subsection I. The reason why that one was there, because before I was drafted, keeping in mind that the zoning administrator is doing something. But now that's been eliminated, I mean, it's not a permit, it's a waiver, but I guess it is a permit. Okay, we'll keep it. Depends on how I is redrafted. Never mind. Ignore what I said.
We can't ignore this. Everybody okay with L then?
Yep.
Thank you. On to M, enforcement. I have some comments here. I think since that I think RTF should be spelled out, because anybody coming in here will not want to know what RTF is. I didn't until I looked it up.
We did that in B, but yeah, I can do it, it's not a big deal.
Under A, or number 1, I know this is Webster Township, and 99.9% of the people know it's Webster Township, but I would add the word Webster before townships. And I think zoning administrator should be capitalized since it's a formal title.
I'll capitalize zoning administrator, but there are many places in the zoning ordinance where we refer when township means Webster Township. It's,
I know that. Okey-doke. You don't think it needs to be added?
And I think we should stay consistent with the rest of the ordinance.
Okay. Any other comments on number 1? Number 2, M2.
In Brian's letter, he said compliance determination, this says conformance determination.
I think it was Mike Wozniak who actually issues those letters, made a recommendation to use the word conformance. So kind of
refer to Mike Wozniak's.
But in Brian's notes, I would suggest one minor change. Changing GAMP certification, oh, that's somewhere else? Did you say GAMP certification somewhere?
GAM's conformance determination from MDOT. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm referring to, go to Mike's letter on page 10, or I'm sorry, Brian's letter on page 10, where he's saying he would suggest changing GAMP certification to GAMP compliance determination. Where did you make that change?
I changed that to GAM's conformance determination. I used Ryan's recommendation and changed certification to conformance determination instead of compliance, because Mike Wozniak said to use conformance.
Yeah.
Right, I get that, but this is where you wanted to read compliance, but I kept
So we're following
conformance because Mike Wozniak.
Mike Wozniak, the guy from MDOT, is the one who wants the word conformance.
There's no change, Martha. I'm just glad.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 3. Inspection reports, any comments there? Number 4, zoning administrator caps. Please,
And the period.
in a period. Anything else on number 4? Seeing nothing? Moving on to section 13.6, fence regulations.
There's no change on this since the last couple of meetings, right?
Yes.
No change, but there is a period that should become a comma. Julie, did you catch that?
I did not.
Oh,
Go after material
yes.
for fourth line.
Oh, man. No cookies.
Snoozing my time, I got the.
Anything else that needs to be reviewed? Again, that there are no changes from our previous document. Same with Article 2 definitions. Reviewed this in the last draft. There are no changes there in the last draft to this one.
Just a small comment. If we are leading towards setting a public hearing, we won't be able to make the September meeting due to the notice requirements and the publication dates. So the public hearing should be for the October meeting.
Really?
Right. It's a 15-day notice required, and the paper only publishes once a week. And they need to send it a week before the publication date.
So if we tried to set a date for September 11th, we could not make it.
Not for that one, unless you want to set a special meeting to make the publication.
Why can't we set a special meeting to have a public hearing, to move this forward?
We can. We have that option.
I know, and I think given that we owe it to our community and our board, that we should set a special meeting. If everybody is available, in a couple of weeks, we meet the 15-day deadline, we could get it into the newspaper, and we can get this to the board in a reasonable amount of time also, can't we?
So let me count. Any time the week of 16th. Wait, no.
Well, be the week of the 9th. The week of the 16th is the board and our next planning meeting.
You can't
Right, I think I missed.
Right.
That's what she's saying, you have to go to the week of the 23rd.
I think that's
Let me
not-
just count
that's
again,
not
one more
correct.
time. If I send the
That
notice,
can't be right.
give me one. Let me count again. I think I may have missed, we have 31st in August.
Right.
Eight. Oh, we may be okay.
September 5th is 15 days.
No, the publication,
And then,
if I send the notice tomorrow, then it will be published next week.
Right.
So that, I think we are okay for September 18th.
So having it at our stated meeting.
Yes, I'm sorry. I counted 3 times in the office.
So September 18th for a public hearing
The regular meeting.
18th.
18th.
and our regular meeting.
I have one more thing.
Okay, that being the case, yes.
The last definition, pasture land, add a period, remove the hyphen. A period where? Pasture land, add a period, remove the hyphen.
Oh, did you get that, Martha? Thank you. Okay. We've got a date. Review the document. May I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
There's a draft motion on page 8, by the way.
Second,
There's a draft motion on page 8.
I'm looking at it. In the matter of text amendment 22-ZTA-02, I move to set a public hearing for September 18th, 2024, to amend the zoning ordinance, section 13.25, keeping of animals, and section 2.10, definitions, and section 13.60, fences, based upon the draft as presented with changes as summarized by the township planner at tonight's meeting.
Second.
Roll call. Okay.
Aye.
George?
I,
Paul?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you, commissioners, for your work on this. And thank you for the public for all of your input and over the time that we worked on this. We have no new business tonight. We have discussed a little bit about September meeting. We had some topics that were supposed to be on this, but did not get into the agenda. Is there any hope that shipping containers can be on our agenda for September?
I think so, because there are not many changes for keeping of animals, so we can bring shipping containers back for September.
I also have on August stormwater management. How is that looking?
So I think Sri needed to make some changes, and then we needed to have one more small group meeting before we came back to this group. So can we at least have that small group meeting before the next meeting? I'm asking Sri,
Oh.
yeah, because she's got to make some changes before we meet.
I'll definitely try my best.
Okay.
That could work for you too, Paul, possibly,
Well,
to meet?
yeah.
Yeah.
There was an issue several months ago about pool covers.
Yes.
What's the disposition of that?
So the resident who requested you to consider never showed up for 2 meetings, and so it was discussed and removed off the agenda until he comes back.
Any other discussion items, commissioners?
So
pending
Pending our review.
Yeah.
the review.
So I think my request was at least,
review
can Sri make her changes and we meet before the next meeting? We may or may not be able to do that in time.
Well,
We'll see,
but
yeah,
provisionally, what we have on our agenda.
it's a goal for us.
Okay. I'm asking this also. We have a matrix that we agreed to look at, given what's on our agenda for September and a public hearing. We agreed at our last meeting to bring that forward at some point and add another item. My suggestion is we not do that for September. I
What,
think we've got a pretty healthy agenda for September.
Right, the public hearing, shipping containers, and would you like to just spend a couple minutes to look at the list of amendments? Or,
That might be
what matrix are we talking about?
our matrix of items and priorities that we're supposed to be looking at over time.
not the master plan one, I just wanted to
Yeah.
present the items on my list
Yeah,
to give you guys a heads up.
I think that'd be valuable, but fun with them, we can look at future meetings and figure out where to go. Okay, thank you. Anything else, discussion for the September meeting? We now have time for additional public comment. Would anybody like to make a comment?
Dave Haley, 7223 Mulder. And just so you know, I don't have chickens, I don't have rabbits. My grandkids would love for me to have something. Anyway, on G4, it only says chickens for less than 1 acre. Should it say chickens and rabbits? Because according to the public meeting that we had several months ago, it was chickens and rabbits that some of the kids were upset with. And then in M1, where you talk about enforcement, if we really need to have a boundary survey prepared by a licensed surveyor with all necessary information to verify net lot area, that's about $2,000. I don't, that's why I'm still all in favor of saying, if you've got 1 acre, you got 1 acre. If you got 2 acres, you have 2 acres. To need a surveyor, a licensed surveyor to prepare to verify your net lot area, that's asking too much of our residents. At least that's my feeling.
The following sentence offers an alternative, which
There's an answer to that.
Do you want to?
Yes, on the same sentence, M1, the second line says, information from Washtenaw County Maps website may be an acceptable alternative to verify compliance. So they don't have to do a boundary survey. That is just kept as an option if we're not able to come to an agreement or if there's a discrepancy with the information that's readily available at no cost.
Yeah, so the answer to that is that the county information is fine, but if the applicant contests it and says, no, I don't believe the county information is accurate, then the burden falls upon the applicant to prove that the county's information is not correct through the boundary survey. And I think that would happen very seldom, but that's the intent.
And we also said the following information may be requested as needed.
Right. Thanks for that insight. Anybody else like to make some comments at this time? Seeing none, informational items. Does anybody have some informational items they'd like to provide? I do. Although it's fairly low likelihood that we will be impacted by this, remember a few meetings ago, the MTA, I mentioned that they had discussions about an online webinar on alternative energy sources. for either ground-based solar or wind farms. If you're interested, they have sample documents that have been drafted and are on the MTA website for you to look at and or download. Again, given the way our township is, there's probably not a likelihood we're getting into this, but if you want to inform yourself, it's out there to read, that draft document. Lastly, commissioners and Sri and Mr. Kingsley, the week before our September 18th meeting, I'm going to be pretty much out of pocket. So I may be able to get to my phone at night, maybe if there's service. Please keep that in mind if you're sending documents 2 hours before the meeting. I'll be back 2 days before the meeting, but that week before could be tough.
Would you like to borrow my satellite phone so you don't have it?
I would, please, as long as I can download PDFs.
If you give us a forward,
There ain't no address where I'm gonna be. Thank goodness. I have nothing else. Commissioners, do you have anything else? May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, second. Rick seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing no opposition, thank you very much to the public and to our commissioners for being here tonight and doing the work you do.